The sun hung low over the horizon like a dying ember, painting the sky with streaks of gold and blood. Dust drifted lazily through the air, carried by a warm wind that whispered secrets through the crooked streets of the frontier town of Dry Creek. Silence blanketed the town square, except for the rhythmic creak of a rope swaying from the gallows. Beneath it stood Ioka. She wasn't trembling. Her chin was held high, her long black hair braided tightly with strands of white feather and turquoise beads. Her eyes, dark and wide, searched the horizon beyond the crowd. Somewhere out there, she believed, someone watched. Someone who loved her still. The townsfolk gathered in a loose half-circle, their boots grinding the dirt, their hats in hand. They didn't speak, didn't cheer. They just waited. A few children peeked out from behind their mother's skirts. One old man spat into the dirt and shook his head. A skinny dog slinked under the saloon's porch and whimpered. The smell of horses, sweat, and dry rot clung to the air. Ezekiel Brody stood near the lever, his gloved hand resting on the handle like it was an old friend. He wore a black duster, boots polished with fresh grease, and a grin that never reached his eyes. His mustache twitched when he spoke, always like he was talking to himself more than anyone else. Justice, he declared, voice rising above. The wind, we deliver it swift and fair in Dry Creek. Let it be known that even savages ain't above the law. Ioka didn't flinch. Zeke leaned closer, his words for her alone now. Any last words, squaw? Ioka looked past him. Her gaze pierced the ridgeline beyond the town. Her lips parted, and in a voice as soft as falling rain, she whispered one word in Comanche. Toka. The outlaw's brow creased. What was that? She said nothing more. He shrugged. Don't matter. The lever dropped. So did she. Gasps erupted from the crowd, some turning away, others watching with morbid reverence. The rope stretched and snapped taut. Her body swung gently, beads in her hair catching the light one last time. The only sound was the groaning of the wood and the moan of the wind as it carried her spirit into the canyon. On the ridge above, Toka watched with hollow eyes. He hadn't blinked once. His hand clutched a bow, but he did not raise it. He had come too late. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of burnt sage and blood. Below, the town returned to its routines slowly, nervously. The crowd dispersed, heads low, footsteps dragging. But Toka remained, crouched between two rocks, invisible to all. He was painted in shadow, wrapped in deerhide and silence. Sun dipped behind the cliffs, and darkness crept over Dry Creek like a black tide. Toka descended after nightfall. He moved like a ghost, soundless, swift. He passed the saloon where men drank and pretended they hadn't watched a woman die. He crept by the sheriff's office, where Brody sat laughing with a bottle of whiskey. He stopped at the gallows. Still hung there, her body swaying. They hadn't even bothered to cut her down. He climbed the steps, each creak of the wood a heartbeat in the silence. Reaching her, he untied the noose with steady hands. Her body slumped into his arms still, warm, still smelling of cedar and fire. He laid her gently on the ground, brushing the hair from her face. I'm sorry, he whispered in Comanche, pressing his forehead to hers. Forgive me. Then he stood, eyes like flint, muscles tensed. A storm roared inside him now. One, not of rage, but of something colder. Purpose. Determination. Zeke Brody would die. The next morning, Brody awoke to a noise on his porch. Still hungover, he staggered to the door, rifle in hand. What he found made him drop it. A hawk feather soaked in blood lay across his boots. Beneath it, the symbol of the Comanche carved into the wood. Sheriff Ellis found him an hour later, still staring at the symbol. Something wrong, Zeke? Brody didn't answer. His hand trembled. That afternoon, the townsfolk noticed the changes. a skinned rattlesnake nailed to the church door, a string of beads tied to the well's crank, tracks in the dirt that led nowhere. The bartender at the Dusty Mule swore he saw eyes watching him from the window after sunset, glowing faintly in the dark. Just nerves, someone muttered, but nerves didn't explain the horses going missing, or the trapper found in the woods, with his throat slit and his eyes removed. No valuables were taken, just his tongue. Brody put a bounty on the Comanche ghost, offering gold and whiskey. No one claimed it. In the shadows, Toka moved. He wasn't attacking yet. He was sending a message, one carved in fear. Each night he visited the ridge where she died. There he laid down gifts, her favorite flowers, wild mint, small bundles of sage. He sat by a fire and whispered stories to the stars, stories she used to tell him. Her voice lived in the wind, in the rustling grass, in the cry of the owls. Their love had been forbidden, but it had been real. He remembered the night she first touched his face, the trembling in her fingers as if she couldn't believe he was flesh. He remembered how she laughed with her whole body, how she once said, "The wind cannot be caged, and neither can I." He had believed her then. And now she was gone, but not forgotten. 3 nights after the hanging, Toka found one of Zeke's men, Billy Trask, a young tracker with nervous eyes and too many stories. Billy never made it home. The next morning, his body was found lashed to the steeple of the church, upside down, a bone knife through his chest. No blood, just a single word carved into his forehead. Ayoka. Brody stopped laughing after that. He started drinking more, yelling at shadows, keeping lights burning through the night. He sent more men into the hills, but none returned. "You think it's one man?" Sheriff Ellis asked. "This feels like a war party," Brody spat. "It's that Comanche dog, the one that loved her." Ellis sighed. "Zeke, maybe you shouldn't have hung her. She killed a rancher. She was trying to save a settler's child from drowning. You know that now." Brody stared into the fire. "Doesn't matter. She was his. Killing her was killing him." That night, a letter was found on Brody's pillow. A single piece of hide, burned at the edges. A feather tied to it with raw SINEW. It read, "You stole the sun. I will bring the storm." Brody didn't sleep. In the hills, Toka prepared. He sharpened his blade by moonlight, painted his face with ash and ochre. He stood before the canyon and let the wind pass through him. He became part of it. There was no one left to mourn him, only Ayoka. And vengeance. By the 7th day, Dry Creek was a ghost town. Shops shuttered, children hidden. The gallows had been taken down, burned in the night. No one knew who did it. Toka watched it burn from the ridge. Flames reached up like hands, begging the sky. He did not smile. The time for warnings was over. The wind had carried his grief. Now it would carry his wrath, and somewhere in the shadows, Zeke Brody heard it coming. The sound of footsteps in the dark, of war drums in the distance, of justice older than any law he knew. Toka was no longer a man. He was the storm, and Dry Creek would remember his name. The night was a black wound stretched across the desert, stitched only by the faint shimmer of stars. Toka moved silently through the mesquite and dust. The war paint on his face cracked and dry. His eyes, dark as obsidian, scanned the hills. Ahead, the weight of Ayoka's death had not dulled. It pressed against his ribs like a stone he couldn't exhale. Her scent still clung to his memory, smoke, pine, river water. Her voice lingered in his ears, a memory more haunting than any. Ghost, he had not cried. Not once. The Comanche did not mourn with tears. They mourned with war. A horse snorted nearby. Toka stilled. Below him, by the banks of a dying creek, A campfire sputtered in the wind. 3 of Zeke Brody's men huddled around it, unaware. They were prey. One sharpened a blade. Another scratched a flea from his neck. The third, Jeb Carden, leaned back, singing off-key about a saloon girl in El Paso. Toka watched. Jeb had been there at the gallows, spitting tobacco as Ayokas. Neck snapped. He'd laughed. Called it good riddance. Toka waited until Jeb's song turned to a wheeze, and then he struck. He descended the rocks like a shadow unbound, his blade whispering through the throat of the man, sharpening the knife. No scream, just a gurgle and the splash of blood. On hard-packed earth dot, the flea-scratcher turned too late. Toka's tomahawk buried in his temple with a sickening thunk. Jeb jumped to his feet, fumbling for his pistol, but it was gone, ripped from his belt by Toka's second hand. Jeb ran. Toka let him dot. It wasn't mercy. It was message dot by the time Jeb stumbled back into dry. Creek blood-soaked and half-naked, the townsfolk had already locked their doors. Sheriff Ellis refused to open his window. No one wanted to hear more bad omens. "He's coming," Jeb gasped. "That redskin freak's coming for us." Brody found him an hour later, hiding beneath the church steps, teeth chattering like a child. The outlaw kicked him once, hard, then crouched beside him. "Did you see him?" Brody asked. Jeb nodded. He didn't blink. Didn't breathe. He ain't human. Brody pulled a cigar from his coat and lit it with shaking fingers. "A man," he said flatly, "and every man can bleed." But his voice lacked conviction. Dot out in the hills. Toka stood atop a cliff overlooking Dry Creek. He watched the torchlights flicker across the roofs like fireflies. He knew Brody was inside that town, surrounded by weak walls and weaker men. But the time wasn't right. He needed to cut deeper. Each night he struck. A camp raided here. A wagon burned there. He left feathers tied to rifle barrels. Buffalo bones stacked in spirals beside corpses. The Comanche symbols for vengeance and remembrance carved into wood and flesh. The frontier whispered his name. In nearby towns, travelers spoke of a spirit warrior who rode with the wind and killed without sound. Children were told stories to keep them inside at dusk. Toka hunted one of Brody's scouts 2 miles outside Whiskey Gulch. The man begged, offered gold. Names, secrets. Toka asked only one question. Who told Zeke to hang her? The scout shook his head. Don't. No. He said it was justice. That she killed a rancher. But she saved a child. Toka interrupted. The scout paled. I didn't see it. I swear. Toka leaned in. And now you never will. The wind swallowed the scream. Back in Dry Creek, Brody grew restless. He no longer rode alone. No longer left the saloon without 6 men at his side. He hired bounty hunters, ruthless men from the border, with scars and dead eyes. They disappeared within a week. Sheriff Ellis tried to calm him. "You're drawing too much blood, Zeke. He ain't gonna stop." Brody slammed his whiskey glass on the table, splintering the wood. "I want him dead. I want his goddamn heart nailed to my door." He got neither dot instead. The next night, someone nailed a scrap of hide to the church cross. It bore a painted symbol, the circle and slash of a Comanche blood oath. Under it, a single word etched in charcoal, .ryoka. That morning, as Brody sat on his porch, the first snowflake of the season fell. It melted against the heat of his rage. He didn't notice the figure watching from the ridge. Toka had not slept in days. The hunger clawed at him. The cold sank into his bones. But he endured. Pain was the song of the living, and his grief had become melody. He remembered Ayoka's touch, the way she traced the scar on his chest with 2 fingers. "This was made by a white man's bullet," she had whispered. "Let it be the last wound they ever give you." He had promised her then, in the secret canyon where they met, that no other wound would touch him. He had broken that promise when he failed to save her. Now he would keep another. He crossed the river by night, the icy water biting at his legs. Smoke rose in the distance. Brody's men had lit bonfires, hoping to scare the shadows back into the hills. But shadows weren't afraid of fire. Only Truth Dot near the edge of an abandoned mine. Toka found the tracks of a woman. Small boots. Settler make. Recent Dot he followed them through the gulch, across brittle rocks, until he heard a horse whinny, and then a voice soft but firm. Don't move. He turned. A woman stood 10 feet away, a rifle steady in her arms. She was tall, her hair loose around her shoulders, her coat dusty and patched. Her eyes were green, fierce. She didn't flinch when he faced her. I ain't here to fight, she said. But I ain't here to stop you either. Toka tilted his head. Who are you? Eliza May. Used to be Eliza Brody, Zeke's ex-fiancée. She lowered the rifle. I want him dead too. Toka said nothing. Eliza took a step forward. He killed my brother over a land dispute. Shot him in the back. Sheriff wouldn't do a damn thing. So I left. But now, I heard what you've been doing. I followed the blood trail. He studied her face, looking for lies. Found none. You're Comanche, ain't you? She asked. Yes. You loved her. He nodded once. Eliza looked away, then met his gaze. Then we got something in common. He didn't trust her, but he respected her. They rode together at dawn, cutting across the canyon floor toward Brody's northern supply camp. The men there were drunk, careless. They died without a sound. Eliza pulled her trigger only once. She didn't miss. Afterward, by the fire, she watched Toka wrap a broken arrowhead in a strip of Ayoka's cloth. His hands were steady. You ever loved anyone before her? She asked. No. Think you'll ever love again? He stared. Into the flames. No. Eliza offered him whiskey. He refused. You know, she said softly, Zeke ... He'll be expecting you to come alone. I won't. Good, because I got one shot left, and I'm saving it for him. Toka didn't smile, but something in his shoulders eased. That night, while they rested beneath a dead cottonwood, Eliza told him about her brother, about how Zeke used to be charming, even kind, until the war ended and the killing never left him. How power became his new religion. She fell silent then, eyes fixed on the stars. Toka whispered a Comanche prayer for the dead, not just for Ayoka. Now, for all of them. The wind stirred the ashes of their fire. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Morning came cold and sharp. They mounted their horses and rode east, toward the mesa where Zeke had built his stronghold. The trail ahead was steep, dangerous, but the blood trail behind them was worse. And neither of them planned to turn back. ChatGPT said, the wind screamed through the canyon like a mourning widow, tearing across the jagged cliffs and painting the sky with dust. The sun hovered low and red, bleeding into the earth as if foreshadowing the violence yet to come. Toka and Eliza reined in their horses atop the ridge, staring down into the narrow pass below, once called Dead Man's Hollow, now whispered as the canyon of bones, bones of cattle, horses, men, and ghosts. A place where bad men made worse decisions. Zeke Brody's hideout lay just beyond its winding throat. Toka's face was stone, his war paint faded, but no less fierce. Every muscle beneath his copper-toned skin was taut with purpose. The rage he carried had fermented into something sharper than fury resolve. Eliza sat beside him, her rifle strapped across her back, her green eyes scanning the canyon floor. Her lips were cracked, and her breath came short, but she said nothing. She had followed the trail this far, and she would follow it until it led her to Zeke's blood. There were signs in the dirt hoof prints, ashes, and shards of broken whiskey. Bottles. Rhodey's men had camped here recently. Too recently. Toka knelt and pressed 2 fingers to the earth. Still warm. He pointed eastward. They moved at dawn, he said. 12 riders, maybe more. Think they know we're coming? Eliza asked. They hope we are. He rose, scanning the sky. Ravens circled overhead, black and watching. The Comanche believed ravens carried the souls of the restless. Today, the sky was full of them. They descended the canyon slowly, the cliffs pressing close on either side. The air was heavy with rot and memory. Each turn revealed new scars-collapsed wagons, blood-stained rocks, rusted pistols half buried in sand. No one passed through this place unmarked. The canyon remembered every scream. Eliza broke the silence first. This place feels like it's holding its breath. Toka didn't answer. He felt it too, the weight of silence before a scream. The canyon was a throat waiting to swallow. They were halfway through when the first shot rang out. The crack echoed like thunder, and a bullet kicked up dust inches from Toka's boot. He threw himself off the horse, rolling behind a boulder as more shots followed. Eliza dove behind a jagged outcropping, drawing a rifle. Her horse screamed and bolted, blood blooming from its flank. "They've set a trap," she hissed. "Bastards are above us." Toka nodded, eyes narrowing. He peered between stones and spotted them figures along the ridge, tucked behind. Rocks, rifles braced. 7 men, 1 reloading. Another lighting a fuse. Dynamite. He cursed under his breath and crawled low across the gravel. A rifle cracked, and a pebble beside his face shattered. He kept moving inch by inch. Eliza fired once, dropping a man who leaned too far forward. "That's one," she muttered. Toka crept along the canyon wall, climbed a narrow seam of rock, and rose behind 2 ambushers before they could spy him. His knife flashed. One dropped silently. The other wheeled around, but Toka smashed his forehead with the hilt and sent him sprawling. A fuse hissed behind them closer now. "Eliza!" he shouted. She turned just as he grabbed the sputtering stick and hurled it high into the sky. The explosion boomed above them, harmless. But the distraction cost him. A shot rang out, and pain tore through his shoulder. He grunted, staggered, and nearly fell from the rocks. Eliza screamed his name. Blood seeped through his tunic as he dropped behind cover again. He clenched his teeth and tore a strip of cloth from his belt, binding. But wound quickly. "I'm fine," he growled, though his face said otherwise. She scrambled up to his side, eyes frantic. "You're bleeding bad." "Doesn't matter. Like hell it doesn't." He grabbed her wrist, firm but not cruel. "We finished this." The gunfire slowed. The ambushers, what remained of them, were retreating up the slope. Eliza picked them off one by one, her shots sharp and unflinching. The last man disappeared over the ridge, limping. Toka slumped against the rock, his breathing ragged. She knelt beside him and poured water over his wound. He flinched but didn't cry out. "I thought Comanche didn't feel pain," she said. He gave the faintest smile. "We feel it. We just don't give it power. You're giving it blood." They stayed there until the sun dipped fully behind the hills. Shadows crawled across the canyon walls like silent snakes. The air was colder now. Eliza helped him stand. They moved slower. Each step Toka took was deliberate, and his grip tightened around the tomahawk strapped to his hip. Ahead, the canyon narrowed 2 stone pillars marked the final stretch. Past them, the path opened into a valley dotted with tents, crates, and a central fire pit. Zeke Brody's fortress. Eliza stared down at the scene, breath catching in her throat. There were more men than they'd expected. 18, maybe 20. but they moved with nervous energy, guns clutched tight, eyes darting. "They're scared," she whispered. "They should be." Toka unslung a pouch from his belt and poured its contents into his palm ashes, feathers, bone fragments. Each item a piece of Ioka's funeral fire, each one a prayer. Eliza watched him, eyes softening. "You really loved her, didn't you?" He nodded. "She saved me from rage, from the path my father walked. She gave me peace. Then, let's take hers back." They made their final approach just after midnight, slipping through the valley shadows. Toka moved like a phantom, even wounded. Eliza covered him, her rifle always ready. They set fires, first tents, crates, wagons. Flames licked the sea. Night, casting long silhouettes that danced like devils. The men panicked. Some grabbed guns. Others fled. Brody stepped out of the main lodge, shirt half-buttoned, pistol in hand. His face twisted in rage. "Show yourself," he shouted into the chaos. Toka did. He walked through the flames, eyes locked on Brody. Blood soaked his sleeve. Smoke curled around him. He looked like a spirit, carved from the bones of the land. Brody raised his gun. Eliza's shot rang out first. The bullet took Brody's hand. Clean off, he screamed and dropped to his knees. Toka didn't blink. He walked straight to him, crouched, and looked him in the eyes. "You killed her for pride," he said quietly. "Now die for it." He drove the tomahawk into Brody's chest. The outlaw gurgled once, then stilled. The silence that followed was sacred. Not empty, but full with release, with justice, with the sound of peace returning to the land. Eliza stood over the body, rifle lowering. Her hands shook, not from fear, but relief. They burned what remained of Brody's camp. Let the ashes rise to meet the stars. Toka dropped the last feather from Ioka's pouch into the flames. He whispered her name. Eliza touched his shoulder gently. "We should leave, before others come." He nodded, but he didn't move. She waited, watching him with something between grief and admiration. Finally, he spoke. "There's a place, a canyon where the grass still grows. That's where I'll bury her. Need help?" He turned to her. "Not this time." They rode together as far as the canyon's mouth. The dawn broke slow and soft, touching the blood-stained rocks. With gold, Eliza stopped, reins tight in her fingers. "You'll be all right?" she asked. Toka looked to the horizon. "I'll remember," she nodded. Then she turned and rode west, the sun catching her hair like fire. Toka rode, alone into the canyon of bones, but the wind, at last, had stopped mourning. The canyon lay silent, as it had for centuries, its red cliffs rising like cathedral walls, cradling the secrets of battles long faded and loves buried too deep for wind to uncover. Smoke curled gently above a small ridge where a fire had burned. Low through the night, and at its edge, Toka sat, unmoving, as if carved from the same stone that loomed around him. He had not slept. Sleep was not for men who remembered everything dot in front of him. A shallow grave had been cut into the earth, barely deeper than a wound. Wildflowers had begun to grow along its edge. Ioka lay beneath him now, her body returned to the land of her ancestors. He had wrapped her in deerskin and ash, just as tradition demanded, but the ritual brought no peace, only weight. Not in the body, but in the soul. The stars had faded, the canyon now caught in the pale, trembling breath before dawn. Toka watched the colors bloom above the jagged peaks, but his thoughts lay further back on a gallows, on swinging legs, on the laughter of men who thought justice was something they could shape with rope and fear. Behind him, a horse whinnied. Footsteps crunched over gravel. I figured you'd still be here, came Eliza's voice, husky with wind and smoke. Toka didn't turn. You shouldn't have followed me. And yet, she said, stepping closer, I did. He heard her dismount and felt her presence at his side. She stood quietly for a long time, her eyes scanning the distant horizon. I thought I'd be angry when it was done, she said finally. But I'm not. I feel hollow. He nodded slowly. Revenge takes. It never gives. I thought. I knew what hate was, she whispered. Turns out, I didn't. Toka reached down and placed a small rock atop the grave, another marker. Not for the world, but for him. She taught me to hate less. Even when I didn't want to. Eliza crouched beside him. Then she left something behind, something good. He looked at her for the first time. The hard lines of her face were soft in the dawn light, her green eyes rimmed with red. She'd lost just as much. Her brother, her name, her home. Yet she stood still, upright, breathing. That mattered. There's something else, she said quietly. Someone else. Toka tensed, but she lifted her hands to calm him. No one who followed Brody. Nothing like that. A child. Girl. 9 years old. They kept her locked in the back of the trading post in Dry Creek. I found her 2 nights ago. Why? She saw Ioka die. Heard everything. They made her watch to teach her fear. Brody said it would break her. He closed his eyes. I told her it was over, Eliza continued. But she didn't believe me. Not yet. What do you want from me? Eliza's voice turned firm. She needs more than food and shelter. She needs to see something good rise from what they tried to bury. Something strong. Toka stood slowly. His shoulder ached beneath the dressing, but he ignored it. I'm no father. You don't need to be. You just need to be something other than what they were. He walked to the edge of the canyon and looked out at the expanse rivers like silver veins cutting through earth. Distant trees like green fire, hawks gliding slow above it all. This land had never belonged to Brody or Ellis, or any man who tried to divide it with bullets or names. It belonged to memory. And memory never forgot. I was going to leave, he said. Head south. Cross the border. Try to disappear. You still can, Eliza said. But that girl, she won't. He turned to her. Where is she now? In my wagon. Couple miles east. She doesn't talk much. But when she does, she says your name. Not full. Just toe. Like it's the only word she trusts. The canyon wind stirred again, whispering. Along the rocks. It sounded like a sigh. Toka rubbed his jaw. I'll come. They rode together down the winding trail that looped around the ravine and through the scrub grass, the sun now casting gold across the land. Coyotes watched them from distant bluffs, but did not follow. The canyon had been fed. Its hunger sated for now, Dot. The wagon sat beneath a crooked juniper tree, its wheels crusted in red mud. A canvas flap covered the back. As they approached, Eliza gave a sharp whistle. A small figure stepped from the shadows. A girl, thin, dirt-smudged, wrapped in a faded blanket. Her hair hung in tangled clumps, and her eyes, too large for her face, clung to Toka as if trying to memorize him. He stopped. A few feet away and knelt slowly. She didn't run. What's your name? He asked gently. She didn't answer. Eliza stepped closer. She doesn't say. They might have taken it from her. Toka reached into his pouch and withdrew a carved wooden charm one. Ioka had made for him long ago. A raven, wings outstretched. He held it out. For you, he said. Dot, the girl stepped forward, took it, and clutched it to her chest. Dot. He looked up at Eliza. She stay with you? For now, but I'm no healer. I'll teach her what I can. Our ways. How to survive. Eliza nodded. Then maybe there's still something worth building. They traveled together for several days east first, toward the plains then, south where the forests grew thick and the rivers colder. At night, Toka told stories by the fire, not of battles, but of stars, of ancestors who rode the sky, of animals that spoke with wind voices. The girl listened, silent but alert. By the fifth night she spoke. "Bird," she said, holding up the carving. He nodded. "Raven. In our stories, it's the Watcher." She repeated the words slowly, carefully. "Watcher." Eliza smiled quietly. They built a small camp near a stream that twisted through cottonwood trees. There was fish in the water, berries in the brush. The girl, still silent most days, began to smile when she woke. She fed the fire in the mornings, fetched water with cupped hands, and began to hum songs no one had taught her. Songs from memory. Toka carved more birds, gave them names, gave her stories. Then, one night, she crawled beside him and whispered something. Was she like me? He stared into the fire. Yes, brave, strong kind. The girl nodded and leaned against him. She said I wasn't broken, she added, even when I couldn't scream. He turned his face slightly. She was right. Eliza, watching from across the fire, felt the ache inside her chest lighten. Just a little spring bloomed with sudden force. Flowers erupted from stone, birds returned with wild songs, and the air no longer carried the scent of smoke. Toka planted seeds in the soft dirt beside the stream. Corn, beans. He showed the girl how to feel the pulse of the land, how to read the wind and what trees whispered about storms. One afternoon, as the wind swirled through the canyon, Eliza packed her rifle and saddled her horse. I need to go, she said. There's a town north. They need someone who knows what truth looks like. Maybe I can remind them. Toka nodded. You will. She turned to the girl. You listen to him. And when he tells you a story, remember it. Stories are stronger than bullets. The girl wrapped her arms around Eliza's waist, then stepped back. Eliza mounted her horse. If you ever come north, find me, she said. Toka offered his hand. She gripped it. We owe each other nothing now, he said. No, she agreed, but we still choose to stand beside each other. That means more. She rode off, dust curling behind her. Toka watched until she was gone. Then he turned to the girl. What name should I call you? She looked up at him, serious. Raven, she said. He smiled. It was the first time he'd truly smiled in months. The canyon remembered every tear, every drop of blood, every whispered vow and shouted curse, but it also remembered healing. It remembered when men and women, scarred by fire, planted seeds anyway. When silence turned to song. And now, in a quiet stretch of land where two rivers met, a Comanche warrior knelt beside a child and helped her place a carved bird atop a new wooden post. Together, they remembered. And together, they began again.